All aboard! Explore Elmhurst on the free trolley this summer through September 16th. Every Friday and Saturday from 12 noon to 12 midnight, you can hop on board in downtown Elmhurst and connect with the Spring Road and the York and Valette business districts. Special Explore Elmhurst signs mark each stop. Enter to win prizes every time you ride. The Elmhurst Public Library hosts story time on the trolley on Saturdays from 2:30 to 3 p.m. New this year, track the trolley. The trolley is equipped with GPS and you can track its arrival at each stop by using exploreelmhurst.com. The trolley is ADA compliant and accessible, so bring the whole family for a fun and unique way to explore Elmhurst.
It was the summer of 1979 in Chicago. Vinyl ruled. Record players were cool. And the hits that dominated the charts were from a genre complete with its own cultural calling cards.
Hi, and welcome to the Elmhurst History Museum. I'm Patrice Roche of the museum staff, and today it's my pleasure to take you on a tour of our newly opened exhibit, Disco Demolition, The Night Disco Died. The exhibit opened in June and will run through October 8th of 2017. The exhibit, Disco Demolition, takes visitors on a journey back to a time in July of 1979, in an era when disco and rock music were duking it out on the airwaves, and when a seemingly harmless sports promotion and radio station promotion erupted in the middle of a White Sox doubleheader. What happened that night? And what came before and after what's now known as Disco Demolition Night? Let's take a look at the exhibit and find out more. The date, July 12th, 1979, may not immediately ring a bell for every Chicagoan, but for those who spent that summer wearing black band t-shirts, listening to rock music on FM radio, and sporting long, shaggy hairstyles, it stands out as a memorable moment from the scrapbook of their young adult lives.
Walk on, Chicago.
It was the night that disco died. More than a few area residents were at Comiskey Park that night, possibly to see a baseball game, but more than likely to attend Teen Night. The event was envisioned as a hook to fill empty stadium seats in the middle of a dismal White Sox season and to promote WLUP's new DJ, a new kid named Steve Dahl. Dahl was fostering an anti-disco campaign on Chicago airwaves after being fired from a local radio station that had switched to a disco format. Fueled by a 98-cent ticket price for fans who brought disco records to blow up between games of the doubleheader, the event quickly careened out of control.
Records flew like frisbees, more fireworks exploded, bottles were thrown, and an estimated 7,000 spectators staged their very own demolition. 4 fans were injured during the melee.
In the wake of the explosion, unruly fans took over the field, causing baseball fans to shake their heads in dismay, and the White Sox to eventually forfeit the second game to the Detroit Tigers. After the smoke cleared, it is said that disco met its demise, and disco demolition, as it eventually became known, remains one of Chicago's most infamous baseball history moments. The verdict is still out on how and why the promotion affected Chicago's baseball and music history, but one thing's for sure, it's 2017 and people are still talking about it. The Disco Demolition exhibit was inspired by a book with the same title by Steve Dahl with journalist Dave Hoekstra and photos by Paul Natkin. The exhibit content is written by Hoekstra as well. Through video footage, eclectic artifacts, interviews, memorabilia, and many of Natkin's photographs, Disco Demolition explores the culture and social context, the music, and the promotion that launched Dahl's career to new heights and propelled disco down the drain. Elmhurst History Museum's curator of exhibits, Lance Tauser, has gathered many of the Paul Natkin photographs alongside some intriguing loaned artifacts to illustrate the exhibit's storyline, including a letter of apology from White Sox owner Bill Veeck to a disappointed fan, many personal items from Dahl's own collection, including his Do You Think I'm Disco record, Insane Coho Lips fan club memorabilia, and more, a one-of-a-kind Hamer-designed guitar on loan from Cheap Trick's lead guitarist and songwriter Rick Nielsen, and the game jersey worn by White Sox catcher Mike Collbran on Disco Demolition night. These items and many others are incorporated into the exhibit experience, which Tauser has designed to be highly interactive and engaging. Many of the features include a blow-by-blow timeline of the event, a music trivia quiz, disco versus rock culture vignettes showcasing clothing from the era, a collection of rock concert t-shirts, video kiosks with footage from the Disco Demolition documentary, and lots more. I'm here in the Disco Demolition exhibit with our curator of exhibits, Lance Tauser. And Lance, tell us a little bit about why you think Disco Demolition made a good subject for an exhibit.
Well, I actually wasn't quite sure at first. There had been a book that was being developed last year by our friends Dave Hoekstra, who we worked with on the Paul Natkin exhibit, and he told me he was developing the book, and he was kind of running through all these stories and tracking all these people down, and I sort of put it to him. I said, do you think there's an exhibit there? And we kind of sat down a little bit very informally and talked about how many chapters he was writing and his approach to the book. And, you know, a book is a book and an exhibit is an exhibit, so they really don't, you know, they don't happen the same way. So it took a little bit of thought, and it took a little bit of sort of, you know, formulating, I guess you could say, to figure out that it could be an exhibit. And so we assumed that, you know, somebody walking in our gallery may or may not know about the event, and so, you know, we broke it down like this. We gave them an introduction. we introduce the cast of characters, so to speak. So you learn about the people that came up with the idea. You learn about this young DJ who had just started at the Loop 3 months earlier, and you learn about this new radio station that had only been in existence for 2 years, the Loop. Everybody knows the Loop now, but it had only been 2 years in existence. And you learn a little bit about the Chicago White Sox that had this history of doing wacky promotions and trying to fill the seats, and they were having a terrible year in 1979. And so then, we don't take for granted that everybody knows what the disco phenomenon was about. So we dive into this culture that really had its roots in the African-American underground scene and the gay scene. And by 1979, it's 2 years past the Bee Gees, so it had really sort of jumped the shark and been very commercialized. And you see all these rock artists doing terrible disco songs. And then you learn about this counterculture, this rock culture. So all the flamboyancy of disco is sort of counterpointed by this sort of rawness of the rock culture. And then we really felt we needed to sort of break down the day that was. And so we provide a timeline that sort of talks about this critical path of events that led to essentially riotous activities and the forfeit of a second game. We then break down the immediate aftermath, how the media handled it, how the newscasters handled it. It was a nationwide story. And then we kind of come out of that to talk a little bit about the death of disco and the emergence of a new music form that came out of the underground African-American community, house music. And at the very end of the exhibit, we kind of address what some people have looked back on as whether or not this event had racial or homophobic overtones. So we really try to open that discussion. We don't dodge it. We kind of allow people to look at the facts and make up their own mind. So, in the end, it was sitting down with Steve Dahl, who's sort of the main character. He was a co-author on the book. And of course, Paul Natkin, who we'd worked with before, who was the on-site photographer of the day. He rode on the hood of the Jeep as they drove around the stadium. So we had one sort of, come to Jesus moment where I said, I think it's an exhibit, but I need your buy-in and your buy-in, and meaning Steve and Paul and Dave. And they all said, yeah, we're in. Tell me what you need. And so that was, almost a year ago. And in the coming months, it's been a lot of coordination, trying to get what I need from Steve. He really didn't know what it meant to put together an exhibit. So I went to his house, dug through his basement, went to his storage units, dug through his stuff, and found a lot of really cool artifacts. Because that's really what museums have to offer nowadays is authenticity. So we have a unique story to tell. We have these artifacts that help tell a story, and we sort of compartmentalize it that way too.
Lance, you've really curated some really interesting objects to include in the exhibit to tell the disco demolition story. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, again, as I said before, the authenticity of the exhibit was really important to me. So we really looked for artifacts that could help tell a story. So as I mentioned, I sort of rooted around for Steve Dahl's stuff, and I found one of his microphones. I found some of these wonderful, insane Coho Lip artifacts, which was his fan club, membership cards, figurines, all sorts of stuff. We found materials on the Loop, like the Coho Cola cans, comic books that they made. We found some wonderful things from the White Sox, including actual game day tickets from the Disco Demolition game, the program, a brick from Comiskey Park. We have some wonderful, disco clothing props and a whole wall of record albums. But one of the really, really fun ones that I did was I wanted to look for an iconic element that would help tell the rock culture story. And one of the bands that came to mind was Cheap Trick. They're from the area. They were huge in 1979. And both Paul Natkin and the Loop radio station had a connection to them. So I said, what's it going to take for me to get a guitar to exhibit in the exhibit, to put on display? And one of the things that happened was as I got closer to talking to Rick Nielsen, who's the guitar player, he's got a manager. And I had picked out a couple of images of Rick that I thought would make for a good mural on the wall. Mm-hmm. And we actually went back and forth, and in the end, we picked an image that Rick really liked, and he said, I still have the guitar in that mural, and you can use that in the exhibit. So the guitar that we have actually is a custom-made Hamer guitar that was made especially for Rick. It's got his character face on the back side of it. That's why it's in a case like this, so you can see all the different sides of it. It's made from one piece of mahogany. It is, an amazing piece. It's something that he used in 1979. It's something that was featured in Rolling Stone magazine in 1979. It's a wonderful artifact here for the exhibit.
Fantastic. In addition to the artifacts, you've also added some very cool technology throughout the exhibit. Can you tell us a little bit about this one?
Sure. So again, I wanted a little bit of authenticity. So the way people interfaced with their media in 1979 was through technology kind of like this. If they were going to listen to disco or rock music in this case, they would have listened to it on a radio like this. They would have listened to 8 tracks. They would have listened to maybe cassettes. And I wanted the interface, the way the public would trigger a media piece, would be through this. So the speakers here are utilized. The patrons are prompted to press a button here on the top. A little 2-minute video plays. In this case, it's all about the rock culture. But you've got a Cheap Trick 8-track in there. You've got a Rolling Stone one on top. You've got sticks here as well. So again, trying to make that transition, that understanding of how people would have listened to the loop or would have listened to the disco that they love would have been on these type of technologies. So it's throughout the exhibit. There are clock radios, there's little transistor radios, there's a boom box. So I thought it was kind of a really cool way of making our patrons sort of interact with them as they kind of trigger a video.
Lance, this is a really cool artifact that you've added to the exhibit. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here?
Well, we're looking at Mike Collbran. He was the starting catcher for the White Sox on that day. This is the jersey he actually wore at that game that day. He was actually only in the major leagues for 2 seasons. So he's got very clear memory of the disco Demolition. We were looking for artifacts from the White Sox from the game, and I couldn't find any. We had a relationship with Steve Trout, and he couldn't find his jersey. It turned out it was stolen, and it was auctioned off on some site. And so I just did what anybody else would do. I looked up who was in some of the images that we had in the exhibit, and Mike Collbran was the catcher. And I found him on Facebook, and I sent him a Facebook request saying I'm some curator from the Chicago area looking to add to this exhibit. And took him a while to get back to me, but over a period of months, I garnered his trust. He lent us the jersey, and he was very honest about it. Initially, he said, look, I'll send you the jersey, but there's a big mustard stain down the front, and I must have been eating a hot dog, and it never really came out. And so he said, but you're more than welcome to send it off to be laundered and see if it will come out, but you can use the jersey for the exhibit. And so I was thrilled to do that. There's a great story about Mike Collbran, too. So he's involved in the ceremonial first pitch with Lorelei, the Loop Girl, and Steve Dahl. And as soon as he took one look at Lorelei, he decided he needed to run over and give her a kiss. And before he knew it, both he and Lorelei ran off together, and Steve Dahl was left standing there with the baseball and nobody to throw it to. So it's a great artifact, and we're really happy to have it in the exhibit.
Disco Demolition, The Night Disco Died, is open here at the Elmhurst History Museum through October 8th, 2017. Be sure to stop by soon. Elmhurst History Museum is located at 120 East Park Avenue in downtown Elmhurst, right across from the Elmhurst Metro tracks. Admission to the exhibit is free, and you can find our hours and more information about many interesting upcoming programs and events on our website at www.elmhursthistory.org. Thanks for watching.
This is Steve Dahl.
And Gary Meyer.
Intense rock and roll activity.
Bruce Carey kicking off 25 minutes of commercial-free rock and roll. Rich Michaels putting the cruise in overdrive. This is Sky Daniels. The request lines are open. 591 rock and roll. From Loop at FM 98, where Chicago rocks.
All right.
All aboard! Explore Elmhurst on the free trolley this summer through September 16th. Every Friday and Saturday from 12 noon to 12 midnight, you can hop on board in downtown Elmhurst and connect with the Spring Road and the York and Valette business districts. Special Explore Elmhurst signs mark each stop. Enter to win prizes every time you ride. The Elmhurst Public Library hosts story time on the trolley on Saturdays from 2:30 to 3 p.m. New this year, track the trolley. The trolley is equipped with GPS and you can track its arrival at each stop by using exploreelmhurst.com. The trolley is ADA compliant and accessible, so bring the whole family for a fun and unique way to explore Elmhurst.